Hey everybody, we're back. Unbelievably, we're back. We almost didn't make it today, but welcome back to Hot Hardware's 2.5 Geeks. I'm Dave Altavilla, and I am with my good friends and fellow geeks, Marco Chiappetta and Paul Lilly. Likely less geeky than me right now. I'm having technical issues, so I'm geeking out big time. How you guys doing?
I'm doing pretty good. Can't complain.
Yeah, yeah. What's new and exciting? Anything?
Yeah, I got some really cool, exciting stuff going on. I have some new graphics cards can't talk about yet. I have the brand new updated NVIDIA Shield in the home theater. I've been shooting video all morning. Hopefully we can have that produced today, and going to try to grind that article out by tomorrow because I'm flying to see some other cool new graphic stuff tomorrow. And I got to play with some cool stuff recently as well. So it's all good.
And if you told anybody, you'd have to kill them, so we won't do that, right?
Well, if I told anybody, I wouldn't get to play with the good stuff in the future, so I'm not going to tell anybody.
Right. He's such a nice boy. Paul, are you working on anything top secret or otherwise on double
Not
secret
top
probation?
secret. Something a little bit unique. We don't get a lot of rugged items in, but we have a Dell rugged laptop that I'm looking at right now, and it has it's definitely some cool features on it. This thing can take a beating, as we'll see probably later this week or next.
Yeah, I actually spent some quality time with that Dell rugged item myself and put it through some torture tests on video, which I'll drop into your piece as well. So folks will hopefully get a kick out of that. I get to abuse computers for a change, which actually I'm pretty adept at that now that I think of it. But anyways, that's great. So we got lots of stuff cooking. It's been a while. We're going to actually, just so folks know, we're going to actually move hopefully to a new format soon. We're going to be streaming on Twitch, but right now we're sticking with the Google YouTube Hangouts. It's not Google Hangouts anymore. It's all piped through YouTube, but we'll be changing the venue a little bit. I think we're going to be trying to do the Twitch stream thing, but for right now, let's give it a go with the old-fashioned way, so to speak. Marco, you've been spending some quality time with Intel's Kaby Lake, the desktop variant, various model SKUs of that processor, and putting it through some torture tests of your own, right? What's going on these days in the land of overclocking with Intel Kaby Lake?
Yeah, so we posted our full in-depth review of Kaby Lake on the desktop when the Core i7 7700K came out. But sort of hidden in that spec sheet of items coming from Intel was a dual-core unlocked Core i3 with hyperthreading based on Kaby Lake. It's the Core i3 7350K. So all the same, fundamental architecture and technology as the 7700K, but with half the cores and cache lopped off. But it comes in only $168. So when I overclocked the 7700K in our initial review, I used an air cooler. I kind of wanted to give worst case scenario. If anybody went and bought one in a store and put it in their system, you can roughly expect to hit the same clocks I did in that article. But for the 7350K, I went and got a pretty powerful liquid cooler, not a crazy high-end one. I don't think anybody's buying a $300 liquid cooler to cool a $168 processor. So I went with a Corsair H80i and, liquid cooled this bad boy and overclocked it as far as I could in a gigabyte board and got, I kind of hit that holy grail. I hit that 5 gigahertz stable across the board with a $168 chip, and performance is pretty strong. And anything single-threaded, fastest chip we've tested, because it's obviously the clocks are so much higher. Now in multi-threaded apps, it's not going to hang with the additional cores on higher end chips, but big significant boost in performance while overclocked. Really fun chip if you're an enthusiast and you want to build an inexpensive Kaby Lake based system.
Interesting. So this is how much again for the chip?
Well, the 1K SKU pricing is $168. Street prices have been a little higher. It will eventually, come down to that $168 range, though.
Yeah, $168. 2 cores, 4 threads with hyperthreading, and 5 gigahertz.
So even without the overclocking, base clock is 4.2 gigahertz. So it's a fast little speedy chip. If you don't need crazy multi-core resources, you could build a cutting edge Intel based rig, latest Z270 based motherboard, just all the latest stuff, without breaking the bank on the processor.
Gamers and other sorts of I guess I'm trying to think of other applications where you aren't so heavily multi-threaded, but are gamers going to see much of a difference with only 4 threads of processing versus, say, a quad core of the same speed?
It depends what they play. So it's not just the cores; it's all that extra cache you get with the bigger chips. So you can overcome some of it. If you play older games that aren't very threaded, yeah, it's perfectly fine, plenty fast enough. Newer games that are threaded or games that are saturating the cache, you will get better performance from a more expensive, bigger chip. But it's not like you're not going to be able to play something on here. If you wanted to build an inexpensive Kaby Lake based system, you can absolutely do it and enjoy everything that's out there right now.
And you actually did a little bit of game testing at overclock speeds to show the difference at high resolution and low res.
Right.
What do you see? What do you see for for this boost? Is there much of a value proposition even in 1080p and higher, that kind of resolution?
Yes and no. So the low resolution tests are in there to show you kind of untapped potential. If you were to look at the physics test or the low res crisis test, you'll see, a 10-15% uplift with those higher clocks. Now, if you introduce a GPU limit, the spread's going to get much smaller. If the game performance is limited by GPU performance and the CPU is fast enough to feed it, doesn't matter how fast that CPU is. It's the GPU is the limiting performance factor. So in 3D Mark Firestrike Extreme, while overclocked, saw a very tiny fraction improvement. In Hitman DX12 at 1080 high quality, it was a little better. It was like a 5 or 6% performance. Actually, I take it back to 8% performance improvement. So, and that was with a GTX 1060. So not a crazy high-end graphics card, trying to keep it all realistic with hardware that is most likely to get paired together. So there is additional performance to be had. It's just not going to be earth-shattering if you're GPU limited. Now, if I ran that test at 4K, I probably wouldn't see any difference because the GPU had just been choking the whole time. Right.
I was putting up your graphs as you were talking, and you see a modest uplift, between the clock speeds. But yeah, nothing earth-shattering. It's much more GPU bound. What about, there's a lot of different flavors of Kaby Lake on the market now, and there's even a Pentium family of Kaby Lake processor out there that's like sub $100. How does this stack up, this Core i3 7350K versus one of those Pentiums? And I guess, you're also looking at integrated graphics here. You get HD 630 in this chip. How does that compare versus the Pentium ilk?
So the Pentiums, the cheaper chips typically have less cache, lower clocks. They're not unlocked. Just basically bare bones featuring the architecture. For any sort of gamer, anyone that's passionate about their PC, definitely go with the Core i series. Don't go with the Pentium. If you just want a super cheap processor, for your Aunt May to browse the web, you could probably get by with one of those. It's just painful for me to recommend them when you have a chip like this for $50 more. Sure.
Paul, have you played with this flavor of Kaby Lake yet? Have you had any Kaby Lake joy in house? I'm trying to think what you've tested for systems these days.
No, not a whole lot with Kaby Lake, but a question from Marco. You said you got to 5 gigahertz pretty easily. Yep. Is that what most people are able to do? I mean, is that like a reasonable expectation?
I think so. I didn't go nuts with the voltage, and I know multiple other tech editors that have hit 5 gigahertz. Intel was showing off an air-cooled one at CES running at 5 gigahertz. I could actually boot into Windows at 5.3. I just couldn't complete benchmarks, and I was almost able to complete Cinebench at 5.2. I just had to keep sort of cranking down, and if I put the voltage too high, I was tickling with the throttling at 5.1 and 5.2. So to get that balance, I think I peaked at something like 82C at 5 gigahertz with 1.4 volts. So if you crank the voltage higher, that temp's going to get closer to that 91 degree mark, and the chip's going to throttle anyway, and you're going to lose performance. So finding that sweet spot, if now, let's say you're upgrading a system and you already have some killer cooling, and you are going to have a more powerful cooler than the H80i, I think you could probably do more than 5 gigahertz stable on this chip. Yes.
Nice.
So you had the Corsair H80i, which is a closed loop, self-contained liquid cooler.
Right.
Fairly small radiator. What size? It looks like, I don't know, maybe 130 millimeter or something like that. Or
Yeah, it's just a 120, but with dual
120.
fans. So you have two fans for some extra airflow. It's like I said, I think I got it for, it was only $80. I figure most people are not going to spend more on the cooler than they would the processor. So again, just trying to be conservative and realistic to show people what they could expect in a real world setup, not some crazy, I plugged my $168 chip into a, $300 triple fan, huge liquid cooler that no one's ever going to do.
Right. Makes sense. Well, I think it's good stuff. I mean, overclocking still alive and well, and supported more and more these days by all the manufacturers, including Intel. So good stuff. Any recommendations other than what you saw here in our review? Any observations? I mean, that 5.2 gigahertz. Any other tweaks or whatever you could toss out there for folks?
Well, the one other thing to keep in mind is, unlike older previous gen Core i processors, you can actually tweak the base clock and have lots of flexibility. Back in this Sandy Bridge, Ivy Bridge days, you can only change those by a few megahertz. And even then things got flaky. With these, you have basically full freedom, but because the multipliers are so high, it's really like, like a half multiplier anyway. For example, if you're at 5 gigahertz, you're using a 50 by 100. If you just tick it up 1 megahertz, tick the base clock, you just, boosted the same as half a multiplier step.
Right.
So not really, just play with your voltage, make sure you're cooling it properly, keep that temp, max in the low 80s, mid 80s, so you don't tickle with the throttling, and you'll be fine.
Guys are delitting processors these days.
Yep.
Do we need to really delid? Will delitting something like this really get you that much more? I mean, it's got a heat spreader on there for a reason. Intel puts that heat spreader on there for a reason, obviously.
The heat spread is to protect the die, though. You can shave a ton of temperature. If you were to delid and direct cool that die, I wouldn't be surprised if you can knock 20 to 30 degrees off it. And even just replacing the TIM with a better TIM, a significant increase in cooling performance. What's it going to get you? I don't know, 100 megahertz tops if you're lucky. Is it worth it? Only if you're crazy and you don't mind breaking a chip.
I guess if it's a cheap chip, maybe it is worth it, right?
You know what someone should do? See, lots of guys don't do direct die cooling because you can easily chip the die and your processor is useless. Someone's got to come out with, basically just shave the top off the integrated heat spreader so you can't chip the die underneath, just so it's, basically a rim that protects the die. And then the people can have some fun because then you don't have to worry about breaking your chip and you can get direct die cooling. It'd be awesome.
So you're going to pull a CNC machine tool together for something like that for everybody? You're going to invent that?
I'm not, but somebody
needs to invent that tool, and we just gave you the idea, so you owe us royalties. Dang it!
Exactly.
All right, well, let's move on. Let's move on to something mobile. And I actually took a look at. I'm taking a look at a new machine now from Dell. It's actually the Dell XPS 13 2-in-1, and it also has Kaby Lake on board. Kaby Lake Y to be exact, and that's actually Intel's. I'm going to hold this machine up, and you can take a look at it. So this is the XPS 13 2-in-1. Again, powered by Kaby Lake Y. This is Intel's 4.5 watt to 7 watt TDP up, thermal power design up. Spec processor that's powering this machine. This is the XPS 13 in the 2-in-1 variant. As you can see, it's got that fully articulating, no, I'm not going to break it, 360-degree hinge. So this baby turns into essentially a 13.3-inch tablet. What's interesting about this machine, other than the fact that, like the XPS 13 standard machine, it's a beautiful 13.3-inch Infinity Edge display here, very thin bezels, as you can see, lots of delicious carbon fiber in the palm rest area, that same design signature as the standard XPS 13. It's also a little bit thinner as a result of that 360 hinge, and a little bit different design, a little bit edgier design here, and a few ounces lighter as well. But what's different about this, powered by Intel's Kaby Lake Y, is that this is essentially, and some folks might find this a dirty word, the Core M version of Kaby Lake. And if you recall from previous generation Intel Core M series, whether it be Skylake or Broadwell, performance wasn't quite the same as full-fledged Core I. But Intel did something a little different this time, and they, versus a Core i5 or a Core i7 standard processor that you find in notebooks. With Kaby Lake Y, they are not calling the Core I, the i5 and the i7 versions Core M. It's not Core M5 or Core M7 anymore. It's now Core i5 and Core i7, which might add some confusion in the marketplace because it's not full 15-watt Core i5 or i7 type processing power that's on board these processors. So a little bit of, I guess, model number mumbo jumbo going on, rejiggering, if you will. But what's interesting about that is that Intel actually, you might think on the surface, might be pulling kind of a fast one. And, hey, Core M initially in those flavors didn't receive the reception we wanted. So maybe let's just change the part number. They now put a Y in the suffix. So in this case, it's a Core i7 7Y75 processor that powers this machine, which again is the 4.5-watt version of Kaby Lake. But what's interesting though is that performance on this machine is actually competitive with previous generation, like Core i5 full 15-watt, standard U processing power. So it's, previous generation, meaning Skylake, Core i5 kind of performance out of essentially what is a Core M, 4.5-watt Kaby Lake Y processor. I did some testing with it, and the reason for that is that Kaby Lake actually has a little bit higher boost clocks now, 3.6 gigahertz on this processor that's in this machine, but it also has longer sustained boost in that boosted clock speed range. So the result is, and I'll see if I can share it out here for you. The result is, again, this machine actually performs. I did a quick little early tease. Let me share it out right here. Present to everybody. There we go. So this machine actually, as you can see, is hanging with the likes of here we're in SunSpider, which is a very sort of light duty, not heavily threaded JavaScript benchmark. And you can see it's hanging here with the likes of actually Kaby Lake Core i7 full 7500 U's in this test. Again, what's coming into play here is the responsiveness of Intel Speed Shift, most likely with the Microsoft Edge browser in that test. But then let's slide down to PC Mark 8. Now here, a little bit less competitive than, not going toe to toe with Core i7 7500U Kaby Lake, full U spec 15-watt device, processor. But here hanging more with, again, a Core i5 6200U, Core i7 6500U from the previous gen Skylake 15-watt family. Again, this isn't a big, number cruncher test. This is PC Mark 8. So a light duty sort of office productivity and content creation test. Now let's look at a little bit heavier duty stuff. This is Cinebench, and obviously a 3D rendering test here has a single and multi-threaded variant. We actually show the CPU and then OpenGL, which is graphics. But as you can see here, again, hanging in that Core i5 6200, 6300 range, middle of the pack, not down the bottom of the pack like Core M5 from last year in Skylake. As you can see down the bottom here, that's a machine. The Dell Latitude 137370 is powered by a Core M5 6Y57 here, bringing up the rear at the bottom of the stack. So there's that blue bracket. That's the Core i7 7Y75 that's in this Dell XPS 13 2-in-1. So interesting stuff. Intel managed to really get a nice boost in sort of standard everyday computing with Kaby Lake Y at 4.5 watts. And Dell actually, I should say, goes one step further with this. They actually have a dynamic power mode that allows this machine to scale to the 9-watt power envelope. Doesn't give them a higher clock speed at higher than 3.6 gigahertz for the chip, but it does sustain that boost. And again, a 9-watt thermal envelope in this machine. So good stuff so far. And I'm still going through the benchmark gauntlet with it, but I'm impressed. I'm impressed with the build. I'm impressed with the performance. It's not the Core M that you used to know, so to speak.
Nice. Have you had a chance to test the battery life at all on it?
Just started kicking the tires on that. I've put it through our video loop test, and so far, so good. I want to run it a few more times just to make sure I've sort of got a normalized baseline. But it's actually I don't want to steal my own thunder before the full review goes up in the next week or so, but it's actually taking the top spot, and I think it does that because this machine. The last time we looked at the XPS 13, we looked at the 3200 by 1800 res display. This machine that I'm testing now is the full HD 1080p display. Again, with Kaby Lake Y. It does have a smaller battery, a 45 watt hour battery versus I think it's 60 watt hour in the standard XPS 13 with the 15 watt Kaby Lake chip. But that combination of lower res display and Kaby Lake Y, which is able to really get chill when it's doing light duty stuff like looping in HD video, and it's just running on the video block within the chip. It's not really exercising the cores too much. This thing sips power. It's actually it's scored so far our best video loop test benchmark for battery. So
very nice.
Yeah, it's a tasty little machine. If you're looking for a heavy duty workhorse that's going to crank serious numbers, obviously full 15 watt Kaby Lake U is going to offer you better performance there. But for a 2-in-1, which this essentially, obviously it's a 2-in-1 hybrid. Certainly a bit of an unwieldy 13-inch tablet, but you can definitely use it in tablet mode. It's like 2.7 pounds. For this class of machine, it's impressive. Marco, your thoughts?
I love that thing. That's such a sexy little device. Exactly the kind of form factor I'd want. I have yet to experience Kaby Lake Y myself, so I would need to feel it and use it for a few days to see if it would suit me. But in terms of the form factor and the design, it's exactly what I'm looking for in a machine.
Yeah, this is your kind of machine. For me, I like a little bit roomier keyboard. That 13-inch version of the XPS, for my hands feels a little cramped because they get, again, that Infinity Edge display allows them to get the chassis so much smaller, which is great. It's super portable. So I actually like the XPS 15 a little bit better. It's kind of like almost like a 14-inch or a 13-inch size laptop with a 15-inch display and a little bit more room in the keyboard. But if you like thin and light petite machines, this is pretty badass. And Intel did some really good work with Kaby Lake Y. I'm impressed with it. It's a little confusing, I think, to consumers to make that part number change, but I think Intel, they've got a reason for that. It's not Core M performance from the previous gen. It's up a notch, and it's up a lot in certain cases.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, let's move on. Let's move on to something different, Marco. You've been playing around, or you've been investigating things in the single board computing realm these days, and even doing some open source work, or at least working with folks that are doing open source work. We did a little project called Building Your Own Classic Game Console with RetroPi and the Raspberry Pi single board computer. What do you know?
I know quite a bit. So I didn't actually write the piece. We had a new editor named Chris write this piece. But if every self-respecting geek throughout the holiday season was trying to get their hands on one of those Nintendo NES classics, and they were impossible to get. They were so hard to find. They were selling out everywhere. But what lots of people don't know is if you want to do any sort of retro gaming, You could build your own setup for roughly the same price as one of those, old school retro consoles. So Chris basically took a Raspberry Pi 3. All you need is a Raspberry Pi 3, a controller, and a micro SD card, and access to a PC to do some setup. But literally, there's an OS called RetroPi that is essentially set up with a bunch of emulators already, including Nintendo, a bunch of other retro consoles. And you essentially format this micro SD card and you install the RetroPi image, and the Raspberry Pi boots off the SD card into it, the custom OS with the emulators built right in. Now, if you already own some of these cartridges and a device to pull the ROMs from the cartridges you own, you can then play them on this device. Now, if you're shady, there's other ways to do it. We're not going to talk about that. But for literally, I think we have a kit linked in the article for a Raspberry Pi 3, a case, a micro SD card, an HDMI cable, a couple of heat sinks, and the necessary power adapter. It's like $60 on Amazon. So if you like to get your hands dirty and tinker a bit, and also learn technically an alternate OS with RetroPi, you can have quite a bit of fun with something like this. Really cool. Connect it up to your TV, connect up a controller, and you have a little mini game console that fit in the palm of your hand.
Yeah, I'm actually showing it out now. I'm actually showing the kit you're talking about. You can see the Raspberry Pi itself in the middle here. There's a little clear case on the left. You've got your software that comes with the kit, of course. Raspberry Pi runs a version of Debian Linux, I believe, if I'm saying that properly. I'm not the biggest Linux user in the world, but you've got the HDMI cabling, you've got an AC power adapter, you've even got some heat sinks to keep the chips cool, and a little micro SD to nano SD card adapter, so you can put it in your PC, load it up with ROMs, put it back into the Pi. Something we want to make a distinction of here, and you said you mentioned if you're shady, which none of our viewers are, is this is a situation where you are downloading ROMs from game cartridges to get onto this machine. You absolutely have to own the ROMs rightfully, or I should say the cartridges, to rightfully have access to those ROMs and emulate. It is something where you need to have copyright and own that software. Yes, there's lots of places where you can download them, but that's highly illegal. We're not suggesting that. What's interesting about this is you can game from multiple different console platforms from days gone by that maybe your machines are dead and out of whack, and not working anymore, and you've still got those cartridges kicking around. It can be done, and it can be done in a fun and in sort of DIY, build it yourself way, right?
Yeah, exactly. And these little single board PCs, well, they're not PCs, they're little single board computers. They're really cool, and there's other models out there. Like, for example, we use a Raspberry Pi 3, but ASUS just came out with something called the Tinker Board that physically looks just like the Raspberry Pi 3, which the Raspberry Pi 3 uses a Broadcom SoC, and ASUS has that new Tinker Board with a MediaTek SoC. And if refresh my memory, I think they're claiming 2 to 3x performance improvement.
Yeah, it's actually a Rockchip SoC.
Rockchip SoC. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, it's another ARM variant. I'm actually sharing it out now. Another ARM variant. It's supposedly twice as fast, almost twice as fast as the Raspberry Pi, at least in terms of Geekbench numbers. That's what ASUS is citing for their benchmark. And it has some other features that the Raspberry Pi doesn't have. So Raspberry Pi comes with 100 megabit LAN. This has got full gigabit Ethernet LAN. And of course, 802.11, BGN Wi-Fi and HDMI and all the other I/O connectivity, the Raspberry Pi, but it's got a significantly faster CPU and 2 gig of RAM capable. Actually, it's built into the board, so 2 gig of RAM versus 1 with the Raspberry Pi. So a little bit more powerful here. I wonder if RetroPi will run on this. I imagine it probably does, or maybe they have to recompile that somehow for a different ARM core. I'm not sure.
There would probably need to be some alterations made to the drivers for the different hardware on ASUS's board. something that I want to just put out there, because I would love to do this. I've been toying with the idea of emulating an Amiga on a Raspberry Pi. There's a release called Amibian that basically emulates an Amiga on the Pi. But the most sought after Amiga in the retro community is the Amiga 1200, because it has the AGA, the next generation graphics capabilities, and that can't really be perfectly emulated on the Pi because it doesn't have the performance. But I think that ASUS board would have the performance to do it. So I would love if the guys at Amibian checked out ASUS's board and did something to float out there into the universe and hope that it happens.
We're talking to you, right? We're looking at you, Amibian.
Exactly.
So, but all right. So I'm not familiar with that platform. What's cool about that other than, I don't know, maybe Leisure Suit Larry kind of stuff or something? help me out. What's good retro gaming on that platform?
So in terms of the games, there's tons of old great games, right? There is from the Wing Commander series to games from Sphygnosis, like Shadow of the Beast was a great game. And then there's tons of those old adventure games that were great. But the Amiga I love talking about the Amiga because, first of all, I sold them years ago and I was really good at it. I was #1 salesman in the country at one point for the retailer I was working at. But the Amiga was so far ahead of its time, it's ridiculous. Now, when you think multitasking and, a true GUI and a mouse and all that stuff, you think of much newer machines and much more expensive, powerful machines. And true multitasking didn't come until much later. I believe it was called preemptive multitasking back in the day where, with Windows, it was running a task. It would stop, run the other task, and just switch back really quickly. The Amiga did true multitasking in 1984 with an OS that ran off floppies, with a GUI, with dedicated sound, graphics, specialized chips that allowed all this really cool stuff. So the Amiga, even now, hey, people are calling to ask about the Amiga, still has a following today. Like there's still people that love their Amigas today. There was a Kickstarter recently for new A1200 cases. There's a company called Aion that's still developing the latest Amiga OS with new hardware. So there's just this real cool group around the Amiga, and I just have an affinity for it. So I would love to build a real good working emulator at some point.
I have to admit the retro resurgence is fascinating. You need to turn off that ringer.
I know, you're right. I'll do it right now
before I blow it up. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. No, the retro resurgence is impressive these days. I mean, it's an interesting sort of phenomenon where people are just, coming out of the woodwork to not only buy, but to get together in, social networking communities, whether it be Facebook or what have you. And, it's really kind of making a huge comeback, and there's business behind it too. Like there, obviously Nintendo's killing it, with the little mini NES. So, it's just fascinating. I wonder what's spurred that,
it's just, all of us original gamers are getting older and have more disposable income, and
want
to enjoy some of that stuff.
Disposable income. Yeah, I got a kid in college. I don't know what that is.
Yeah.
He's right though. I mean, we were all kids playing on those systems, and now we're all grown up, and it's $60 for an NES Classic Edition when it's in stock. I mean, that's something we can pull off, and it's got 30 or 60 games on there pre-installed.
And it takes you back to that special place.
Yeah. For a little while. Then after about a half hour, you're like, man, this kind of sucks. Why did I want this?
Yeah, I'm gonna go play Overwatch.
Do you have one, Paul? Do you have an NES Classic?
No, I tried, but I, like everyone else, I couldn't find one. And it's still that way right now. I'm looking online as you guys are talking about it, and it's out of stock everywhere unless you're gonna go to eBay or Craigslist.
So you gotta pay a fortune. Dust off that old box of cartridges and get yourself a Retrode and download those ROMs and build a Raspberry Pi DIY, baby. Or maybe with the Asus Tinkerboard. All right, well let's move on and switch gears real quickly back to mobile, and then we'll wrap this puppy up. I'm actually taking a look, or I should say I took a look at Google's Pixel XL, which is currently I have migrated over as my daily driver for for a handset. This is the Google Pixel XL. It is the latest premium flagship phone from Google. It is the first to be branded as a built by Google phone or designed by Google phone. It's actually built by HTC, but very much Google design signature. You've probably seen it around. It's been out in the market for a little bit, and certainly there's a fair number of reviews out there for it. But I actually did a little piece where I talk about my migration from Samsung's Galaxy S7 Edge right here to the Google Pixel XL. And I can tell you it was an interesting transition for me. Google Pixel is an impressive phone, and in a lot of ways, I was sort of itching to try something new because I've been on the Samsung platform for a while now. And for me, what was spurring me, and guys, I don't know if you've experienced some of this yourself in different handsets, but what was spurring me, to make the jump beyond the fact that this is a really nice premium handset with a fast SoC, Snapdragon 821 on board, 5.5-inch AMOLED display, all the good stuff. Really nice camera too, by the way. The camera is impressive. But what was spurring me to consider another phone after living happily in the galaxy, so to speak, was the fact that I was dealing with, for lack of better words, just cruft that was building up in my Samsung phone. TouchWiz seemed to get more bloated by the day, and I was having really just performance issues with this device. Now, obviously, a hard reset and format, erase and format, factory reset of the device would certainly help things out. But for me, it felt like, although this handset is built so beautifully and so well, it felt like it was being hampered by the software. And I really wanted to see if, look at how bright that display is. It's just blowing out the screen. I wanted to see what a pure Android experience was like. And I guess the net of my experimentation, I realized that Android 7 Nougat as it exists today is really so refined now. Google has it so refined that there's really nothing missing anymore. It used to be that I enjoyed some of the features of what OEMs built. What are you doing, Marco?
I'm fighting with my phone.
What did you got a block on you, like a brain block on that phone or something, man?
I pulled the batteries.
No, but what I found fascinating was that Android Nougat seems feature complete now, and I liked sort of what was previously what I enjoyed for Samsung with TouchWiz, the additional features, the access, the sort of the bells and whistles of their skin over Android. I'm not missing now, and I get all the performance constantly on this phone without the bloat in the way and slowing it down. And this phone feels dramatically snappier and more responsive. I never have to reset it, and just thoroughly impressed. I do miss the build quality of the Galaxy S7 Edge. I cannot lie about that. There's nothing, in my opinion, no handset on the market currently that's built better in terms of just feel. So solid, that curved display. The build quality is just super premium with this device, but it more than makes up for it. The Pixel XL more than makes up for it for me, with performance, responsiveness, and a pure Android Nougat experience now, which is so well refined. So impressed.
Are you going to stick with the Pixel for a while, like you did with the Galaxy?
Yeah, I think I am, it depends, how things go. The nice thing about, Pixel and phones by Google, whether it be the Nexus generation before that, Google rolls out, a new ROM update, and, it's available for your phone, right off the bat. And there's some things on this that you get that you can't get on any other handset currently, although it's coming, like Google Assistant, the new Google Assistant, which is actually really nice. A little bit more powerful. Conversation mode where you don't have to keep saying "Okay, Google" all the time to it. I'm going to wake it up here if I say that again, though. But yeah, no, I think I'll stay around here. I like the weather's nice, so to speak.
And that'll be something to revisit down the line too, because I know my experience with Android was the same as yours on the Galaxy, where over time, uh, not just performance degrading a little bit, but I'd just run into quirky issues every now and then. And I remember Marco wrote a piece a couple years ago about potential bit rot, that might be a problem. I don't know if it is or not. I just know that I've run into those quirks when I'm on Android for a long period of time. So it'd be interesting to see if that happens on the Pixel XL as well.
Yeah, I've been living on the Pixel XL now for probably better part of 3 months, probably about 3 months, and so far, and I'm a pretty heavy user. I mean, in lots of different ways. We publish a lot of things, whether it be social posts or what have you. I'm always on this thing, and so far nothing has changed. It is absolutely every bit as snappy as when it was out of the box and fresh before I loaded my contacts on it. I mean, it's impressive how clean and fast this little machine is. But I had that same experience. I was realizing that I liked, TouchWiz. I didn't mind the skin. It didn't get in the way so much from a look standpoint and a feel standpoint. But over time, Android, bit rot, or TouchWiz bit rot, or whatever, Samsung's bit rot was hindering me. And so I decided I needed to try something new, and I made the cut. And I mean, I came from, I don't know, a Galaxy S5, I think was my last one. I've had the 6, the 7, and been a few generations. So it's a big step, and so far so good. Marco, you're still on Windows Phone?
Yes. Still,
Don't knock that, right, man? So tell us how Windows Phone's feeling these days.
So it's Paul mentioned me writing about bit rot on mobile devices. I took a lot of heat for that piece for some reason, whereas I have experienced it on every platform from iOS to Android to Windows Phone too. Just periodically, you need to wipe your phone, start fresh, and it behaves again. So whether it's technically real bit rot or just pollution of the OS, whatever, I think everybody's going to agree, unless you're some sort of purist that is in denial, that a factory reset of a phone from time to time helps. But I'm still, I can't bring myself to leave Windows Phone because everything else feels like it's running underwater to me. It just feels so slow. That Windows OS is so fast and fluid, but the quality of apps, availability of apps is rapidly on a downhill, just going downhill fast. So I don't know how much longer I can hold out.
Do you think Microsoft's ever going to turn it around and figure it out? Is it the next iteration of the OS? We talked recently about how Windows 10 was running on a Qualcomm Snapdragon chip.
I don't think Windows 10 for phones, as it stands today with the strategy today, will ever amount to anything. What I think is going to happen, they showed that full Windows 10 running on a Snapdragon for a reason. One reason is because now you can have, low priced, low power, super long battery life based clamshell notebooks and tablets technically running Windows 10. That'll be great, but you also will then have the ability. Snapdragon 835 is going to fit into phone form factors as well. Right. So I think what's going to happen is there's going to be no delineation. It's just going to be, hey, if you want a phone running Windows, buy this phone is running Windows 10. They're no longer going to pimp it as a separate platform and just hope that universal apps and the ability to run whatever apps you want. Because that 835 was also emulating, you can run x86 apps on it too. So legacy desktop apps worked. It'll just be like, oh, here you can just have a PC in your pocket, right? And we'll see if that takes off.
You still have, obviously, the PC in your pocket model. You still have UI issues to deal with. So, for example, you open up an Excel spreadsheet or whatever, I don't know, the fonts are going to be all kinds of wacky. It's going to be adapted to a phone display, a little 5.5-inch or whatever display, right? You're still going to talk about UI adjustments, even though it's running the same code.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
But then you end up with, so like Continuum never really took off on Windows 10 for phones because you need to have the monitor somewhere, and you still didn't have access to your apps. And whereas if you have if that phone becomes your main PC, and then you have a docking station at your office, let's say, and one at home, you now have all your stuff with you all the time, especially if you leverage the cloud. So that's kind of a different model that having full Windows would enable. I just don't know if people want that. We'll see.
Interesting. Certainly could have some utility in the enterprise. No question about that.
Yeah.
Where folks can enjoy that docking experience and take it with them too. So interesting. We'll have to see how the landscape develops. Speaking of the landscape and things developing on the horizon, let's wrap up with potentially some hints to the folks of giveaway stuff, maybe.
Yeah. So we just finished, a couple of weeks ago, an awesome giveaway from Lenovo. We gave away a killer GTX 1080 power desktop PC with an awesome curved display, a G-Sync curved display, and a high-end gaming notebook. That was an awesome giveaway. So we're kind of regrouping, seeing what we have coming down the pipe. It's looking like we may have another gaming notebook and some components to give away before February is over. We're just waiting for the details to sort of come through, but it's going to happen. We always give stuff away. It's just how big the giveaway is going to be that we're working on.
Yes. So for reference, Marco, you were talking about the Lenovo HotHardware holiday giveaway, and we did this. Let me share this out. This was pretty freaking amazing, if I do say so myself. The good folks at Lenovo sponsored. Let me just give a little bit more maximization on the screen here. There we go. So they sponsored, first prize was an Idea Center Y900 Razer edition with a 27-inch curved display, G-Sync, mind you. This system is powered by a Core i7-6700K, an NVIDIA GeForce GTX 1080 graphics card, 16 gig of RAM, SSD, 2 terabyte, 7200 RPM hard drive for bulk storage, and bolt that up to a curved G-Sync display. That was the first prize. Second prize was just a 17-inch gaming laptop by Lenovo. So, Core i7-6820, 17.3 Full HD IPS display, GeForce GTX 980, 16 gig of RAM, PCI Express SSD, and a hard drive on there for bulk storage. 2 really nice gaming systems we gave away free to lucky viewers and readers of HotHardware.com. So we do this to try and spur community and make Paul jealous, mostly because he can't win. Right, Paul?
That's right.
We like to torture Paul with free stuff for people. No.
I still enter.
Yeah. You can't change your name again, Paul. We're figuring it out. There's only so many versions before, and I can look up how many IPs you have too. So
it's Pablo now. It's Pablo.
Pablo. So we try and give away the good stuff and build the community in the process. So make sure you jump in when we do run these things and join us. Have some fun. Now we're at HotHardware.com. We're at Facebook.com/HotHardware, Twitter.com/HotHardware, YouTube.com/HotHardware vids, where you should definitely subscribe if you like us, and thumb this up if you like this little webcast we're doing. And what else am I missing? Google Plus and all over the place, right, Marco?
Absolutely. We're everywhere. Yeah.
You don't have a Tinder HotHardware, right? Right.
I do.
You do?
Do not inquire. Just leave that alone.
Oh, God help us. Well, hey, guys, any parting words before we sign off? Because I think we're done.
No, I'm glad to be back. I hope everybody enjoyed it. Subscribe, come by the site. We have lots of good stuff on tap.
Paulie, and words of wisdom.
Yes. Go Patriots.
Go Patriots. Tom Brady is GOAT. That's right. Super Bowl, baby. We are Pats Nation here. Whether you like that or not, we are, and we're proud of it. But
sorry, Rob.
Yeah, Rob's watching. So thanks for watching, everybody, and we will be doing this hopefully more frequently in a specific time slot. We think we're going to be picking maybe a Tuesday or Thursday night, and you may see us on Twitch, so look out for notifications there. We will be announcing that boldly when we have that all put together. In the meantime, thanks for stopping by. Bye-bye.